Welcome to the Purpose-Based Retirement with certified financial planner Casey Weade. Casey is the president of Howard Bailey Financial.
Whatever risk you face during your retirement years, we've got a plan.
A published author and radio host.
It's not how much we make during the good times, it's how much we keep during those really bad times.
His advocacy for retirees and pre-retirees has made him a sought-after speaker and trusted financial leader.
And putting a real plan together.
This is the Purpose-Based Retirement.
Thanks for joining us. I am Lee Kelso here with Casey Weade, certified financial planner and the president of Howard Bailey Financial. A little bit later in the program, Casey's partner, Marshall Johnson, will be joining us. We're going to talk about whether or not independent advisors give you unbiased advice. But first, we're going to start with a very important topic, and that is how to keep your investment advisor honest. Now, Casey, I know that in this age of do-it-yourself investing, lots of people decide to kind of take that responsibility on, but there are some things we need to keep in mind, right?
Sure. I want to go through 5 of those things. As you said, a lot of people are do-it-yourselfers, but not everybody is. There's Forrester Research did a study that found that 30% of investors would like to delegate some of those investment decisions to someone other than themselves. And during that delegation process, they overlook a lot of really important questions they should be asking. Unfortunately, a lot of those delegators, and you may find yourself being the same way, you may spend more time actually shopping for the car that you're going to drive next and trying to get yourself a good deal than you spend in time determining exactly how much it's costing you to get that investment advice to protect the life savings that you've created over the last 5 years or the last 50 years. You've spent more time shopping for a car than you have actually determining what it's costing you to work with your current planner or advisor. And I think that's something that you need to understand because, yes, I've got a lot of friends that are financial advisors, that are financial planners, and they're great people. There's a lot of great advisors, very trustworthy advisors that are out there today, but you need to make sure you're keeping them honest.
Okay, so let's walk through some ideas that you can use and some questions you can ask. And number one is one that I know is sometimes uncomfortable for people, and that is, show me the fees. What are you charging me?
And you said that's uncomfortable. Why is that uncomfortable to ask that question?
It is, though.
You'd never walk into Best Buy and get yourself a brand new Mac without saying, how much is this going to cost me? You'd never walk into a car lot and buy a new car without saying, well, how much is this going to cost me? But you'll walk into a financial advisor's office and tell them, this is what I need. Can you implement this plan for me? They sell you some products, they invest your money, and you never ask them how much you're paying for those things. You know, when it comes to asking how much you're paying in fees and expenses, don't just forget about those fees that you're paying directly to that advisor. You want to know where all those fees and expenses are. You know, most advisors are biased towards the mutual fund industry because mutual funds pay them marketing fees, marketing kickbacks, and marketing commissions on an ongoing basis, and those fees and expenses can be extremely high, and you can't even see them. You open up your statement and you go, it doesn't look like I'm paying anybody. Well, guess what? They wouldn't be in business. They wouldn't be able to fly that blimp over the stadium during the football game if they weren't getting paid, right? And I tell you, for example, I've got a friend that had a $6 million portfolio. That $6 million portfolio was costing him $138,000 a year because it was all in these actively managed mutual funds without even any advisory fees tacked on top of it. It was costing him only $140,000 a year. Now, what we were able to do is to move those to lower cost index funds and get that cost down to $18,000 a year. That's a huge, think about what that's going to do for your retirement, for your life savings, if you can put a few $1,000s back in your pocket every single year.
Yeah,
so
you bet.
Ask them to show you the fees.
And not just the fees, commissions are awful important and are also often hidden.
Yeah, and an even more uncomfortable question, it seems, that people are afraid to ask their financial advisors, what commission are you getting on my portfolio when you sell me that investment product, you sell me that annuity, you sell me that mutual fund, you sell me that life insurance policy? What's your commission? You know, if you've ever sold a house, you know exactly what your realtor got paid, right? They give you that sheet that gives you a breakdown of all the different expenses that you're going to have and how and where they're going to make their money. You should be asking the same thing of someone that's charging a commission, right? When it comes to a mutual fund, you might say, okay, and this is what you should, this is your strategy. Well, this is the mutual fund you're recommending. What's the commission? And give me a couple of different alternatives that might be lower cost. And when it comes to an annuity, you might say, well, show me more than just one option. And you might find that another annuity pays a lower commission, but a better guaranteed income or better growth opportunity. Then if you're being sold a life insurance policy and they only want to present you with one life insurance option, I'd say that's a big red flag. You want to know that you're getting the best deal. Tell them you want to see the best policies from the best top 5 carriers and make sure that you're getting the best deal. And only an independent advisor is going to be able to provide that to you. So there's a good litmus test to determine if you're working with an independent advisor or not, is to ask them those questions, ask them for variety. And hey, what you might find is you might find that the fund that they're offering you, the annuity, the life insurance policy that they're offering you, maybe it pays a better commission and it's better for you than some of those other vehicles. But how are you ever going to know if you made the best decision for yourself if you don't ask those questions? And I think it's very important to spend the time to ask those questions so that you can have the confidence to know that you made the best decision for yourself.
One thing that many people don't advise or don't do when they're talking to an advisor is discuss tax consequences. Now, tell me why that's so important.
Well, the average turnover for a mutual fund is 70%. So an average turnover for a mutual fund, what's that mean? Well, a turnover for a mutual fund at 70% means that almost every single stock that's in there the first of the year will be different by the end of the year. So they've traded all those stocks, and every time there's something bought, every time there's something sold inside your mutual fund, there's a tax ramification to that. You know, I can give you an example actually of a gentleman that I met from Huntington here just a few months ago, and he wanted to talk about his last year's taxes. Why do you want to talk about his last year's taxes? Because he had a portfolio of these Russell mutual funds that actually lost money last year. His portfolio went down in value and he still ended up having to pay taxes on that portfolio. So here's what you can do. Here's your solution. Next year you get around to February. When February comes, take your tax return into your financial advisor and say, how much of the turnover in my mutual funds, how much did that cost me in taxes this year? Once you figure out what that number is, maybe it's $5,000, maybe it's $50,000, subtract that from your investment portfolio. What's that give you? Your actual rate of return, right? Your after-tax yield, because that's just as important as the pre-tax yield. If you make 10% but only net 5%, well, we might as well take less risk and only make 6% and not pay taxes on it, right?
Absolutely. So what about education? What do I want to ask about there?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, the barriers of entry to the financial advice industry are disgustingly low, and I'll be the first one to tell you it's a scary, scary world out there because there's little to no requirements to call yourself a financial advisor. If you wanted to go out and be a financial advisor and advise people on their life savings in the next 7 days, I could show you how to do that. Because you could go get your securities license in a matter of a few days, take your test, and now you're walking into people's house. Maybe it's an insurance license, you're walking into people's homes, and now you're advising them on their life savings, not even with a high school diploma. You would never do that in the medical industry, right?
No.
If you had to have a major surgery, you walk into your doctor's office and you see DR before their name. You see MD maybe after their name, and you know there's a much better chance that you're going to walk out of that surgery alive than if they don't have either of those things after their name, right?
Right.
Well, your life savings is just as important as your health. I would argue that all day long. So why not make sure you're working with someone that has the education as well as the experience? Because those things go hand in hand. Experience, extremely important, but what about education? Formal education, find a certified financial planner practitioner that's been thoroughly vetted and has the education to handle your life savings.
And here's an opportunity for you to do exactly that. It's our special offer today. For the next 10 people who call us right now, it's a complimentary review of your entire financial and retirement plan, an opportunity to learn more about what's going on in your financial world so you can make the very best decisions moving forward. So for the next 10 callers, Casey and the team will sit down, make some time on the calendars, visit with you, and give you your very own purpose-based retirement. The number is on your screen, 482-9559. Our question of the day, what is the longest bull market in history? Was it 4,994 days or all the way down to maybe just 2,700 days? We have the answer in just a moment.
Hi, I'm a certified financial planner practitioner. There is no silver bullet for your retirement, but that is what financial advisors are selling you every day. The fact is that in the constantly changing world we're in today, it's more complex than ever. But if you can establish a clear plan of action with well-defined goals, you've taken the first step. At Howard Bailey Financial, our goal is to lend you the confidence you are on the path towards the financial independence you deserve. If you'd like help designing your personalized retirement strategy, give us a call today.
You need a plan for retirement to create the lifestyle you've always dreamed of. The first step is to tune into the Purpose-Based Retirement Radio Hour with your hosts, Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson, every Saturday morning at 11 and Sunday afternoon at 1 on 1190 WOWO and 107.5 FM.
If you're just joining us going into the break, we asked you our question of the day, and that is, what is the longest bull market? And of course, we're talking about the stock market here. The largest bull market in history. We had several choices for you. Casey, which one turned out to be the longest?
Lee, the answer is A, 4,494 days. That's 1987 to 2000, about 13 years, with a market average around 15% a year. And now, where we find ourselves is officially in the second longest bull market in history, and that's a really long time, folks. That's 2,701 days that we find ourselves deep into this bull market that we've experienced. And a bull market is a period of time when markets experience extended growth. So their prices are continually on the rise, while bear markets are periods of time when the markets are flat or declining in value. We're at 2,701 days from 2009 to the present. From 1949 to 1956, that number was 2,607 days. From 1974 to 1980, 2,248 days. So what's that look like on a percentage basis? What types of gains have we actually seen during these markets? We're now in the fourth largest gaining bull market throughout history at around 215, 220%. Compare that to 1987 to 2000, that was 582%, and that's right before we hit the tech bubble, right? We also see the second place is 1949 to 56 at 267%, and third place from 1982 to 1987, 228%. So all these different markets that we're going through, these bull markets, these bear markets, I would argue that they're seasonal. The markets move in seasonal directions where we have periods of boom, we have periods of bust, and then we have some calm periods right in between. And that's much like the seasons that we get here in Indiana. We have the spring, we have the summer, we have the fall, we have winter. When we look at the markets, we have much the same thing. If we think about these different seasons as markets, we might enter the spring. And when we get into spring, the flowers come out and it's getting cheery and we all want to go out and maybe spend a little bit more time outside. Then summer comes, now we're out and we're having a good time, we're at the pool, having a blast, everybody's excited. This is never going to end until autumn comes, the leaves start to fall, it gets a little cooler inside, we maybe spend a little bit more time inside, it's raining a little bit more often, and then we get into winter. And as we get back into winter, now it's really getting cold, it's getting a little scary outside, it's dark more often, and that's much like the markets. And I would argue that today we're in a bit of a fall. We've had our summer from 2009 till today. We've had this bull market, and now the market is determining which direction it's going to go next. If we take that a step further, I had a good friend of mine who wrote a Forbes article, and it was a Forbes article written by Rob Russell. If you're at your computer, I encourage you to look it up, Rob Russell on Forbes. And if we look at the seasonality of the markets, he called this the #1 largest indicator of the stock market and where it's headed today. Go back to 1981. When we look at 1981, there were 6 years between 1981, where we had our bear market, right on to 1987. From 1981 to 1987, we had 6 years till the next major market correction. Then we had 7 years till the next major market correction in 1994, where stocks and bonds lost value simultaneously. Then we had 2001, 7 years later. In 2001, what happened? The tech bubble burst. 9/11 occurred, and the market lost around 40% of its value. Then 7 years later, where did we find ourselves? Finally, the market got back to even during 2007. And 2008, the financial crisis ripped it right out of our hands. And now where do we find ourselves? 8 years later. 8 years later in 2016. So what do we see? What type of seasonality do we see? We see every 6 to 8 years the market going through some type of major market correction. So are you ready for that? Are you ready for potential issues in the market in the future? Because we're getting close. So if you have a portfolio that you've worked your life to save and it's now supposed to take you throughout all your retirement years, do you have a plan for the worst? Or are you still investing the same way that you were investing back during your working years? Because now your goals need to change. It's no longer accumulation at all cost. It's about preserving that life savings and creating an income that'll allow you to spend with confidence.
Casey, just a question for you. When you talk about being ready for these big downturns, I know you mentioned a stress test that you can apply to a portfolio. Explain to me how that works and what I'm going to learn.
Well, one of the things that we do, the first thing that we do in our first meeting, we're going to gather information. We're going to take a look at your initial portfolio. And when we take a look at that portfolio, we're going to stress test it. So we're going to see what would happen if we had another 2008. What would happen if we had another 2001? How much could you potentially lose if we see problems in Europe, if we have another war, if we see interest rates rise unexpectedly? We can put it through a number of different scenarios so we can say this is what would happen to your portfolio given what your holdings are today. And many times what we find is that people are taking on a lot more risk than they actually understand. And that might mean saying that you're a conservative investor, right? I have people come in, they say I'm a conservative investor and I really don't want to lose any money. But once we test that portfolio, they can lose 20, 30% of the value. You know, moderate to you means something totally different than your financial advisor. And I think one of the things that we missed out in that first segment when we talked about the 5 things to make sure you're keeping your advisor honest is ask them where they're putting their money, right? Well, where are you investing your life savings? Are you putting it into this mutual fund you're recommending to me? Or are you using index funds? Are you putting it into this managed portfolio or are you doing it on your own? Are you buying annuities? You know, I had somebody that I met with, a couple that I met with a number of years ago. And this comes to mind whenever I think about asking your advisor if they're investing your money the way you are, because he was actually a financial advisor. He worked for a large insurance firm. And I asked him, so what kind of products did you use? And he said, well, mostly variable annuities. And I said, well, I looked at his portfolio. I said, I don't see any variable annuities here. And he said, well, they're just not for me. You know. And why weren't they for him? Because they had high fees and expenses. They weren't an efficient way of investing. I've never met a financial advisor that sells variable annuities that buys variable annuities. It's the same thing when it comes to risk. How much can that 30-year-old advisor afford to lose, or that 40-year-old advisor afford to lose, and how much can you afford to lose? Make sure you have some safe money.
And here's a way to find out what's going on in your portfolio for the next 10 people who call right now. It's a chance for you to get a complimentary review of your entire financial and retirement plan. Casey and the team at Howard Bailey will sit down and walk through all the important questions that affect exactly how you could live your life in retirement and then give you a complimentary purpose-based retirement. So for the next 10 people who call right now at 482-9559, Casey and the team will make some time on their calendars to meet with you and talk about what your future could be. Well, when we come back, Marshall Johnson, the Vice President at Howard Bailey, will be here. We'll be talking about bias among independent advisors. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm a certified financial planner professional. I believe the bar for entry into the financial industry is far too low. You and your hard-earned money deserve better. With a CFP professional, you can have the confidence you are working with an advisor who has met not only rigorous education and experience requirements, but also is held to the highest ethical and professional standards in the industry, resulting in better methods that will address the financial challenges you will face in retirement. If you'd like to see how a CFP professional can serve you, give us a call.
You need a plan for retirement to create the lifestyle you've always dreamed of. The first step is to tune into the Purpose-Based Retirement Radio Hour with your hosts, Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson, every Saturday morning at 11 and Sunday afternoon at 1 on 1190 WOWO and 107.5 FM.
Welcome back. Marshall Johnson, the Vice President at Howard Bailey Financial, has joined us. We're going to be talking a little bit about bias in the investment industry. And you guys are fee-based advisors.
Right, we're fee-based advisors, and then there's also fee-only advisors or commission-based advisors. There's a lot of different ways to pay a financial advisor, and it seems like fee-only advisors are always the one that touting that they have little to no conflict of interest. Fee-based advisors are saying the same thing. Commission advisors, they just avoid the whole conversation altogether. But I'm here to tell you, and I'm not gonna, I might be the first one to tell you this, and that's what we always talk about on the radio, is being here to cut through the smoke and mirrors and tell you exactly what's going on behind the scenes, because there is no perfect model. There is no truly unbiased financial advisor out there. You know, anybody that's ever getting paid to do a service for you, anybody that's ever selling you and making money off of your situation, there's going to be bias there. You know, you have to hope more than anything else you find somebody that's trustworthy, that you can have a good relationship with, but there's always going to be some type of bias. And so what I want to talk about today is, what are those biases? When a fee-only advisor, with a fee-based advisor, with a commission-based advisor, there's always these biases. What are they and what do they look like?
Well, Marshall, you kind of lived that world for a while, didn't you?
You're a fee-only advisor.
Fee only. You know what, Casey? You're right. Absolutely. There's no perfect way to do this, but when you're a consumer just trying to understand the rules of the road, you just want to understand who is your advisor and how does he get paid. So we talk first off about fee only. Fee only is somebody that receives a fee for service. Typically they're going to be independent. They could be independent. But they also may receive a fee for the assets that they manage. They may receive an hourly fee if you're just paying them by the hour. But what you need to understand here, Casey, is the fact that when somebody says they're fee only, that's touted as the one way to be unbiased. But what that means is, this is the world that I was kind of, for the better part of a decade, was raised in. And that's a securities industry. That's stocks, bonds, mutual funds. And when somebody would say, well, what do you think about annuities? And I would come back and say, well, they're probably not right for you, because that's a bias, because we're not able to work in that world.
Or life insurance, for that matter. You know, everybody needs a long-term care insurance. I mean, every time there's something with a fee-only advisor, and it's great if you're working with a fee-only advisor because they're fiduciaries, right? They have the legal responsibility to put your needs ahead of their own, so they could get in trouble for some of these things, but there's still bias there, right? There's still going to be bias when they want something like a mortgage. What if you wanted to go to your advisor and say, hey, you know, should I take some money and go ahead and pay off my mortgage? What do you think they would say? Well, they might have a little bias.
Should it take money out of the account, right?
If you take money out of the account, they're going to lose some of their income, right? So there's bias there when they want to pay off a mortgage or pay off your debt.
Yeah, and it's the same. You talked about commission-based too. So you could be fee-based, fee-only, or commission-based. And commission-based, I think, goes without saying that hopefully this is going away. Part of the Department of Labor's bill to act as a fiduciary. A lot of advisors out there today, over 80% are commission-based. But I think we're going to see changes, and I know we're going to see changes, and that's hopefully going to eradicate some of those things that give little incentive for effort down the road. We don't just want to be sold a product, Lee, and then never hear from our advisor again.
So there's fee, there's commission, but there's also an hourly model where I'm paying a professional for an hour for his time building my financial plan. That seems like a fairly good way to go.
And that's not necessarily a bad way to go. I've worked in that capacity a number of times, but not very often, because what happens is we'll enter and we put together this plan, and then we get back together several months later and say, so how's the plan coming? And the plan didn't go anywhere.
Yeah,
right?
I got busy, things didn't happen.
That's probably the best way to reduce bias, right, is to work based on hourly compensation. But what happens if you sit down with someone and they say, you know what, I'd like to have a guaranteed income for retirement, or I would like to make sure if something happens to me, I have my health care covered, or I have, you know, all these different potential risks. Well, you have to have licenses in order to implement that strategy, so they're still going to have to go somewhere to implement the strategy, and we end up with inherent problems with that model, even though it is one where you can get some truly unbiased advice.
So what about conflicts that arise in the commission world, and how do you resolve, or what should consumers look for?
You know, I think the one thing we need to understand is not just how somebody's compensated, but who do they work for? It's the firm. Are they independent? You know, we are independent here at Howard Bailey. Are they independent, or do they work for a brokerage firm or a wirehouse or a bank? Because then you get to understand this is the world that they live in. This is the services that they can provide. So understanding conflicts of interest, Lee, there's always going to be some conflicts of interest. Let's be adults and have open, honest conversations about what are those conflicts of interest, and here are some issues that you need to know about. So it starts with education, Casey. So when we talk about what folks need to look for, bottom line it for me, what do we need to look for an advisor to get the best advice we can in the most unbiased way possible?
Well, I think it all comes out of a story of a couple that I worked with last week, as we sat down and discussed their situation, they said they'd met with 3 different advisors. They met with a broker, so they met with a broker who worked with stocks and bonds and mutual funds. So they were a risk-based advisor, with one of the large Wall Street firms. And with that large Wall Street firm, they said you're never going to be able to accomplish making 4% a year without taking on any type of risk. Then they met an insurance-only advisor who said, well, you're never going to be able to accomplish that in the risk world. You need to make sure everything's guaranteed. And what they found with that proposal, if everything was guaranteed, they ended up spending a good portion, if not all of their principal. And with the risk-based advisor, they were uncomfortable with having everything at risk. And what we were able to do was show them how, well, we can work in both these worlds. We can work in the world of safety, where we can get ourselves 3 to 6% safely. And then we can take some risk with those remaining dollars that you don't need for retirement. Why can we do that? We can do that because we're independent, right? We can do that because we can work in all those different worlds. But advisors are usually one or the other. They're not independent for one, and they're either insurance only or securities licensed, and they're not providing truly unbiased advice.
That's a great story, Casey, because it illustrates that a couple had to go through the fire a little bit. They had to learn about these different advisors to find out what they're really looking for. And that is my challenge to somebody that's looking for an advisor is, what are you truly looking for? Do you want tax preparation? Do you want tax advice? Do you want some a strategy for Social Security? You know, what are your needs? Then solve backwards and try and find advisors that are going to meet those needs.
Can I look for a designation? What does CFP tell me about the person that I'm working with?
Well, that's going to mean that they've been thoroughly vetted. They went through a background check. They have formal education. They've completed college-level education in order to be a financial advisor. They've passed board exams. They have experience requirements. They have a college degree. And it tells you all those things, right? And then they have a fiduciary duty from the CFP board. Basically, what that gives you is someone that's educated and experienced to handle your situation. It doesn't tell you that you're working with an independent advisor. It doesn't tell you that you're working with a fiduciary that has a legal responsibility to put your needs ahead of their own, but you at least find someone that has education and experience. The next step means that we have to find ourselves someone that's fee-based, right? How do we find someone that's fee-based, that has that fiduciary duty? Make sure they're registered investment advisors.
Yep,
To
and
start
you can
off
always
with.
find out those things.
Yeah.
Ask the right questions.
Yeah, registered investment advisor, someone that's putting together a plan and not just selling you a product, someone that's taking taxes into consideration, someone that if you're near retirement, make sure they understand Social Security benefits so they can put together a Social Security strategy. In the end, find somebody that you can relate with, that you're comfortable with, that you look forward to seeing every 3 or 4 months for the rest of your life.
And if you're approaching retirement, Casey has an additional certification that I think would be of value, and that is?
Retirement Income Certified Professional. So I've also passed board exams in order to specialize in retirement, because this is a very complex area of financial planning. When you're on your way to retirement, it's all about accumulation and investing and creating the biggest return you can. But when you get to retirement, it's a lot more complicated.
And that's where we have to leave it. Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you for joining us. For the next 10 people who phone right now, we hope you'll take advantage of the offer we have on the table. 482-9559 is the number to call. It's an opportunity for you to sit down with part of the Howard Bailey team, maybe Casey, maybe Marshall, maybe some of the other folks at the office, and get a complimentary education about exactly what's happening in your own retirement and financial status. So we hope you'll give us a call at 482-9559, and we will see you next week.